basic drawing. The Create Shapes tab gives you some basic choices. You can create paths based on Bezier curves by pressing the Create Empty Path button or one of the Create Path buttons next to rectangle and ellipse. The rectangle and ellipse can also be created as a so-called primitive shape. It's probably easier to start out with a basic primitive shape, like you would in Inkscape, using the Create Rectangle or Create Ellipse button. These will expose less features, but will make it a lot easier to manipulate and animate shapes. Ellipses will only have one handle to change the size property, representing the X and Y diameter. This will set the Rx and Ry property indirectly. Rectangles will have a handle for size and two handles for rounded corners, Rx and Ry. Use the hints in the viewport when hovering over a handle to get clear instructions on all the options that you have. For instance, the control point for rounded corners allows you to right-click to remove the rounded corners, or hold Shift and drag to only drag the handle you're hovering over, like the Rx. If you release Shift and drag, the handles will make a symmetrical rounded corner. Sculpting paths. Using Ctrl plus left click, you can add a point to your shape anywhere in the 2D viewport while your shape is selected. By double-clicking on a line segment, you can add a point in between two existing points. Holding the mouse over a line segment, you can start dragging to turn it into a curve. You can drag out curve manipulation control points while holding the Shift button. The two control points will be mirrored for a symmetrical effect. Dragging control point handles while holding Shift will keep them mirrored. Dragging them without holding Shift will allow for unmirrored or sharp corners. Double-clicking on the Start node or End node of an unclosed shape will close the loop. Double-clicking on the Start/End point again will break the loop back up. You can recognize the Start/End points by the infinity symbol. You can delete points and control points by using right-click. Using Alt plus click, you can now open a form to set the global position of a point manually. While holding Ctrl plus Shift on a selected shape, you can start adding cutouts or holes to your selected shape. Use mouse wheel to change which shape you want to cut out of your shape, a rectangle, ellipse, or an empty path. Use right-click to change the operation, either cut out holes, clip off edges, or merge, also known as union. When cutting out an empty shape, the created cutout will only have one point. So to see the effect, you need to add more points using regular Ctrl plus click. Use right-click on a line segment to convert it into an arc, an ellipse-shaped band with an X and a Y radius. Use right-click on an arc again to convert it back to a normal line segment. Using left-click on an arc segment opens a pop-up form to edit the properties of the arc. The radius, Rx and Ry value, the rotation, which rotates the arc around its elliptical center. It's only noticeable when the radius is non-uniform, X and Y are unequal. The large arc flag, so when the arc's radius is greater than the distance between its start and end point, it can be drawn the short and the long way round. This flag determines your choice. Then there is sweep, which determines the direction the arc points are drawn in, either clockwise or counterclockwise. This effectively flips the arc around. You can use the change pivot mode to change the origin of your shape, just like you would a sprite 2D. In this case, the pivot will actually be the position property of your scalable vector shape 2D node. Once a gradient is assigned to the fill of your shape via the inspector, its properties can be changed using the same type of controls as with the sculpting handles. Drag the outer orbit of the start and end point of the gradient line using the left mouse button to move them. Drag the color stops along the gradient line to change their position. Remove a color stop using right click. Double-clicking on the gradient line will add a new color stop. The assigned color will be sampled from the existing color at that point. You can change the colors in the inspector. Since release 2.16.0, a couple of new buttons are added to move, rotate and resize all the points of a shape without moving or rotating or scaling the entire node. When moving all the points of a shape, the Node2D position property does not change. This operation also responds to the Snap to Pixel mode of the Project Settings tab. When moving ellipses or rectangles, the offset property is changed to represent the translation. The offset property can be used to set keyframes in an animation player and is easier to use than the batch update button for the entire curve. When the shape type is a path, all the points are simply moved relative to the node position. When rotating all the points of a shape, the Node2D rotation property does not change. Just like rotating a Node2D, holding Ctrl allows you to rotate in steps of 5 degrees. In the case of the two supported primitive shapes, rectangle and ellipse, the spin property is changed to represent the rotation of all the points. The spin property can be used to set keyframes in an animation player and is easier to use than the batch update button for the entire curve. When the shape is of shape type path, all the nodes can be rotated in two ways, around the Node2D's pivot or around their natural center. Rotating paths simply sets new positions for all the nodes' points. When resizing all the points of a shape, the Node2D scale property does not change. This is especially useful when using strokes, because their width will remain the same this way. This operation also responds to the Snap to Pixel mode of the Project Settings tab. In the case of ellipses and rectangles, the size property is changed to represent the distance of points away from their origin or natural center. The size property can be used to set keyframes in an animation player as well, to make it easier than using the batch update button. When resizing paths, all the points can be resized in two ways as well, away from or toward the Node2D's pivot, or away from or towards their natural center by holding Shift. If you want to know more, feel free to contact me via Blue Sky or leave an issue on the GitHub page or a comment on this YouTube channel.